Jenna was a junior at a high school in suburban Illinois, staying late one evening in the fall of 2022 for a debate club meeting that ran until almost 6 in the evening, well after most staff and students had gone home. Walking toward the main exit afterward, she passed room 214, the classroom of her English teacher, Mrs. Calloway. The light was on inside, visible through the small window in the door, and Jenna could hear what sounded like a single voice speaking at a steady, instructional pace, the unmistakable cadence of someone teaching mid-sentence to a room. Jenna assumed Mrs. Calloway was holding a tutoring session and tried the door out of habit, intending to say a quick goodnight. It was locked from the inside, which classroom doors at that school were only able to be in one specific way, a manual interior bolt above the standard handle, which had to be physically engaged by someone inside the room. She knocked. The voice inside continued without pause, as though it hadn't been heard or wasn't being addressed to anyone capable of answering a knock. Jenna looked through the door's small window. The classroom was empty. Every desk visible from her angle was unoccupied. The lights were on. The voice continued evenly, instructionally, from somewhere inside the room she could not see from her limited window angle, the corner near the supply closet, out of her direct line of sight. She found this strange enough that she went to the front office, which thankfully still had an administrator finishing paperwork, and mentioned what she'd seen. The administrator walked back with her, used a master key to open room 214. The room was empty, completely empty. No one in the corner near the supply closet, no recording device, no radio, nothing that could explain a voice. The lights were on. The interior bolt, which the administrator confirmed required physical contact to engage, was indeed locked from the inside when they'd arrived, meaning whoever or whatever had locked it had done so from within a room that was, by the time they entered seconds later, completely empty with no other exit. The administrator pulled up the staff sign-out log as a matter of habit while they stood there. Mrs. Calloway had signed out and left the building at 3:45 that afternoon, more than 2 hours before Jenna heard the voice. Her car, confirmed by the parking lot's exterior camera, had left campus at 3:50. No tutoring session had been scheduled for that room that evening. No other staff member had checked out a key to room 214. The school's explanation, given to Jenna's parents after they raised the matter formally, was that the lock mechanism may have been defective and that maintenance would inspect it, though Jenna, present for that inspection a week later, said the maintenance worker tested the bolt repeatedly and found it functioning exactly as designed, requiring deliberate physical engagement every time. Jenna has never gone back to that classroom after hours again. She graduated the following spring. She said the detail she has never told anyone outside her immediate family is that in the brief seconds before the administrator's master key turned, the voice inside stopped mid-word, not trailing off, not pausing naturally between sentences, but cutting off in the exact instant the key entered the lock, as if it had been listening the entire time.
Mr. Okafor taught middle school science at a school in suburban Maryland for 9 years and had a strict personal routine. Every evening before leaving, he arranged his 30-student desks into their standard grid formation, locked his classroom door, and confirmed the lock had engaged before walking to his car, a habit he'd maintained without exception since his first year teaching. In the spring of 2019, he began arriving each morning to find one specific desk in the back left corner of the room had been turned to face the window instead of the front of the classroom, exactly as he had left every other desk the night before. He assumed the first time that he had simply forgotten to straighten that one desk himself and corrected it without much thought. The following morning, it was turned again. Same desk, same direction, facing the window. He began testing this deliberately, marking the desk's position with a small piece of tape on the floor before leaving each night, confirming the door was locked, and checking the school's hallway camera footage the following day if anything seemed off. For 11 consecutive school days, the desk was found facing the window each morning, despite the classroom door remaining locked overnight according to both his own confirmation and the school's electronic door lock, which recorded no entry to that room between his departure and his arrival the next day. He raised the matter with the school's facilities department, who reviewed the door's electronic log themselves and confirmed no badge or key entry had been recorded during any of the overnight periods in question. The classroom had no windows that opened and was on the school's second floor with no external access point. During the 12th night, Mr. Okafor, increasingly unsettled, asked the school's administration for permission to set up a small motion-activated camera inside the classroom overnight, which was granted given the building's already documented door log discrepancy. The footage from that single night showed nothing for the first several hours. At approximately 2:17 in the morning, the same back left corner position, moved. Not pushed, not knocked, but rotated smoothly and slowly as though pivoted deliberately on its own legs, coming to rest facing the window, with no visible person, shadow, or object anywhere in frame throughout the entire motion. Mr. Okafor shared this footage with school administration, who reviewed it but ultimately classified the incident as an unexplained mechanical or seismic anomaly, citing a minor, unrelated geological survey from years earlier that had noted some shifting soil conditions beneath that section of the building, though no further movement of any other furniture in that room or any other was ever observed before or after that single recorded incident. Mr. Okafor requested and received a room change the following semester. He has never learned which student, if any, had previously been assigned that specific desk and seat in years prior to his arrival at the school, as student seating records from that far back were no longer retained by the office.
Daryl worked as the night custodian at a large public high school in upstate New York for over a decade, responsible for cleaning and basic security checks across the entire building during overnight shifts, including Wing C, an older section of the school that had been officially closed in 2018, following a structural assessment that identified outdated electrical and ventilation systems too costly to bring up to current code, and had remained locked, unused, and unheated ever since, accessible only by a small handful of master keys held by senior facility staff. In the winter of 2021, roughly 3 years into the wing's closure, Daryl began hearing, during his regular overnight rounds, what he described as the unmistakable sound of a class being conducted. A single raised instructional voice, the rhythmic murmur of multiple younger voices responding in unison at intervals, the distinct scrape of chair legs against old linoleum flooring, all of it originating from somewhere within the locked, powerless, supposedly empty Wing C, always beginning around 9 in the evening and lasting roughly 45 minutes before stopping abruptly. Daryl initially assumed sound was somehow carrying from the active part of the building, an evening adult education class held elsewhere on campus, and mentioned it to security as a minor curiosity. Security confirmed no adult education or any other scheduled activity was taking place anywhere in the building during those hours, and that Wing C had no working electrical supply at all following its official decommissioning, meaning no lighting, audio equipment, or heating could have been operating within it under any circumstance. Daryl requested and was given a master key to physically check Wing C directly the following week when the sounds began again. He described entering the wing's main corridor, completely dark except for his flashlight, the temperature noticeably colder than the rest of the building, and the sound, clearly a teacher's voice, clearly children responding, emanating specifically from a classroom 3 doors down, room C9, a room he confirmed by his flashlight beam through its window, was entirely empty, covered in undisturbed dust, several broken ceiling tiles on the floor, no furniture arranged for any class, and no possible power source for any device of any kind. The sound, he said, continued for the full duration of his investigation, seemingly emanating from within that exact room despite what his flashlight clearly showed him standing in its doorway. It stopped at its usual time, roughly 45 minutes after starting, while he was still standing there. Daryl reported this formally to the school district's facilities office. An investigation was opened, citing potential safety concerns regarding unauthorized access to a decommissioned wing. No evidence of any person, device, speaker system, or unauthorized entry was ever found in Wing C during any subsequent inspection, despite repeated nighttime checks scheduled specifically during the timeframe Daryl described. The phenomenon, according to Daryl, continued intermittently for approximately 4 more months before stopping entirely and never recurring again during the remainder of his employment at the school. He has since learned, through a longtime colleague who had worked at the school decades earlier, that room C9 had, prior to a major renovation in the 1990s, been the classroom of a teacher who had died of a sudden illness mid-semester, partway through a school year, a fact that appeared in no official school record Daryl was ever able to locate himself.
Sandra had worked as a substitute teacher across several districts in Ohio for nearly 5 years by the time she was assigned a single day covering a 4th grade classroom at an elementary school she had never worked at before in early 2022. As was standard practice, the front office handed her a printed seating chart along with the day's lesson plans upon check-in, a simple grid showing 22 student names arranged according to their assigned desks, which substitute teachers relied on for attendance and classroom management throughout the day. Sandra conducted morning attendance by calling each name on the chart in order. 21 students answered present or were marked appropriately absent according to the office's separate official attendance system, which she cross-checked as required. One name, however, a name positioned in the chart's back row, 3rd desk from the left, had no corresponding desk occupied by any student and did not appear anywhere on the official class roster Sandra had also been given by the office as a secondary attendance reference. Sandra assumed this was simply a printing or formatting error on the seating chart and continued the day without further concern, leaving the desk in question empty as it had clearly already been throughout the morning.
Around midday, during a quiet independent reading period, Sandra noticed several students glancing repeatedly toward that same empty back row desk, occasionally whispering to one another. When she asked gently if everything was all right, one student raised her hand and asked in a completely matter-of-fact tone whether the substitute could see him too, gesturing toward the empty desk. Sandra, assuming this was simply imaginative classroom behavior common among young children, asked who he meant. Several students, not just one, then offered the same name, the exact name printed on the chart's back row, describing him with consistent, overlapping details. A boy, they said, who sat there sometimes, who never spoke during class, who the teacher usually just left alone. Sandra raised the matter with the school's office during her lunch break, expecting a simple explanation, perhaps a student who had recently transferred or withdrawn, whose name had not yet been removed from the seating chart template. The office staff, after checking, confirmed no student by that name had ever been enrolled at that school under any record they could locate, current or historical, and that the seating chart itself had been generated using the prior week's template, which the regular classroom teacher had apparently never corrected or flagged as inaccurate before her own unrelated absence that day. The regular classroom teacher, when Sandra was eventually able to ask her directly upon her return, seemed visibly uncomfortable with the question, and said only that the chart, quote, must have just had an old name still on it from a long time ago, unquote, declining to elaborate further despite Sandra's specific mention of the student's detailed, consistent description. Sandra never returned to substitute at that particular school again, despite no formal incident or complaint having been filed against her. She said the detail she has never been able to fully set aside is that 22 children in a fourth-grade classroom, with no obvious coordination or hesitation, independently described the same invisible classmate using nearly identical language, down to the exact same phrase, repeated by at least 4 different students without prompting, that the teacher usually just left him alone.
Priya arrived at her daughter's elementary school in coastal North Carolina nearly 15 minutes earlier than usual for afternoon pickup in the spring of 2023, having left work ahead of schedule, and decided to wait near her daughter's classroom rather than the main pickup area, as she occasionally did when early. Standing near the small rectangular window in the classroom door, Priya could see her daughter's entire class of roughly 20 kindergarten students seated at their tables, facing forward, in complete silence. Posture upright, hands folded, every single child still and quiet in a way Priya had never once seen kindergarten students hold for any meaningful length of time, given her familiarity with the classroom's normal noise level from previous visits and volunteer days. There was no teacher visible anywhere in the room from her vantage point. Priya assumed, initially, that the teacher had simply stepped out briefly, perhaps to the restroom or an adjacent supply closet, and that the children had been instructed to remain quiet in her absence, a reasonable enough classroom management technique for a brief moment. Priya checked her phone idly while waiting. When she looked back up, the children were in the exact same position, facing forward, hands folded, in the exact same silence. She checked her phone's clock. 4 minutes had passed. She continued watching, increasingly curious, occasionally glancing at her phone to track the time. At the 11-minute mark, with no teacher having appeared, no child having moved, spoken, fidgeted, or so much as turned their head, Priya knocked on the door. The response, she said, was immediate and uniform. All 20 children turned their heads at the exact same moment to look at the door, with what she described as identical, blank, neutral expressions, before the classroom teacher emerged from what Priya could now see was the small supply closet at the side of the room, appearing mildly startled but otherwise composed, and opened the door normally to greet her. Priya asked the teacher, somewhat lightly, what the secret was to getting an entire kindergarten class to sit so quietly and still. The teacher, Priya said, looked at her with what seemed like genuine confusion, and said the children had been completing a routine independent coloring activity the entire time, gesturing to a stack of coloring sheets on a side table that Priya had not noticed from her window angle, sheets that did in fact appear to fresh crayon markings on them when Priya glanced inside. Priya did not pursue the matter further at the time, assuming she had perhaps misjudged the duration or misread the children's stillness from her limited window view. She mentioned the experience to her husband that evening primarily as an oddity rather than a concern. 2 weeks later, during a separate unrelated classroom volunteer shift, Priya observed the same class during an actual independent coloring period and noted, this time from inside the room, the completely different baseline noise level, movement, and overall energy among the same 20 children during what was ostensibly the identical activity the teacher had described seeing through the window that earlier day, a level of activity entirely inconsistent with the complete motionless silence Priya had personally witnessed and timed for 11 full minutes. Priya has never raised the discrepancy formally with the school, uncertain of what exactly she would be reporting, or whether 11 minutes of unusually well-behaved children constituted anything beyond an isolated, explainable moment she simply happened to witness. She has said only that she has never again seen that same stillness in that classroom, despite occasionally returning early for pickup since, and that she has never fully stopped wondering what exactly 25-year-olds were doing in perfect synchronized silence for the 11 minutes before they knew anyone was watching.
If you are not subscribed to Mr. Fadoo Horror yet, subscribe now. Every week there are new cases like these. Hit the like button right now. It tells YouTube to put these stories in front of more people. Drop a comment below.
Out of all 5 stories tonight, which one disturbed you the most? The locked door, the desk, the closed wing, the extra name, or 11 minutes? I read every reply.